Greg, what's up, man?
Yo, yo,
Listen,
yo.
so I'm gonna tell y'all like the real unfiltered story, which is
Uh-oh.
like maybe a week ago we decided that we were gonna take a break, and Greg like DM'd me and said like there's some real shit going on, help me out. It looks like my battery's draining. Kendi might have to take this over, but I knew when Greg made the bat signal, I was gonna hop in here and help. So there's a very good tweet about criminal justice, and Greg said I gotta hop in on and get on this. So I said I was down for whatever you needed, and like that with 1 day's notice, and I'm going through my own shit. We decided to do it. So, Greg, talk about this criminal justice case. I saw a tweet. It got my blood like fired up because it's the kind of shit we deal
Mm-hmm.
with every day, unfortunately. And the shit you're dealing
Mm-hmm.
with in Portland is the same as the shit we're dealing with in Atlanta. So, can you talk about reintroduce yourself, talk about the situation, and like let people know what's going on?
Yep. What up, everybody? I'm Greg. I wear many hats. One of them was once a hat that Brandon now wears as a chair of the. I always called it the
Former
Atlanta
chair.
DSA. For
I'm
you're
like
the former
I'm
chair
like
too.
Jordan. I'm the ex chair. I'm like Jordan. I haven't put on the 4-5 yet, but I'm waiting for that like maybe like summer or something like that.
Dang. Okay,
You
so
know what
we're
our
two
cycle is
former
like.
bunch of.
That's right.
So two former
Two
chairs.
OGs. The
Yeah.
OG two. That's right. Yeah.
We've only gone Atlanta DSA has only gone through like 7 chairs in the 2 years that I've
Yeah,
known Atlanta
exactly.
DSA, but whatever.
Yeah.
So that was
Shafika
one of
Hashash and Chelsea Stone are the chairs, and they're both in a weird way. Like Chelsea is my real like if
yeah.
I'm who's the Mr. Miyagi, Chelsea Stone is Daniel San, and like that's my student, and everything I know I teach her. And Shafika Hashash is like New York City, and she brings that New York mindset to what they're doing in Atlanta. And she keeps things in order and keeps things rolling strong. Like I'm super proud of both of them that we have. Like I love both of them super. Like Greg, your legacy as like one of our best chairs, as a dude that has always been like extremely for the people and Atlanta DSA. I love all of them, but they're like middle class, midtown people. And you always focused on what the hood needed. Like no matter what was going on, you and Kat were always thinking about like what the most disadvantaged people in the neighborhood needed. And you always kept focused purely on that. And me as chair, I try to follow in your inspiration. And I try to think about like what are the people who are struggling need most, and I try to keep people's brains on that. Just just following your footsteps. Hopefully, somebody following mine. You know what I mean?
I mean, that was the thing. It's like I couldn't do it any other way because we were really living in the hood, and so like we were talking about stuff, and
Real
I'm like,
shit.
and I'm really thinking like, if I knocked on my neighbor's door and told them this, or if I invited my neighbor to this meeting, what would they be thinking? And so
Yep.
I think you have to think of it that way, and especially in places like Atlanta, where if I in Portland, it's interesting because we're so less diverse than in Atlanta,
Right.
obviously. But people
Right.
think that the black community is like automatically supposed to be super duper progressive, and like that's
Right.
not necessarily true. Just like most working class like people like are not inherently just super duper automatically progressive.
Right.
But on individual issues, if you engage them on issues that matter to their lives, like for example in Portland, like not getting shot by the police, like yeah, black people are going to be the most progressive on this issue because we don't want to get shot, right?
Yeah.
So like, uh,
Regardless of ideology, like I talked
yeah,
to a woman that's like 60 years old, like an old fashioned Southern politics black woman, and she was and you know how we're like older black people can be a little bit regressive. Like when she
mhm,
was talking about like she was unironically like take these people who've been arrested, make them work, and they'll appreciate like understanding for the community. And like if you're an older black person, that makes total logistical sense to you. And it wasn't until I was like, yo, It's a lot of people who are locked up on bullshit and don't have a choice as to what they do or not. And like I know you know somebody in your life who's been arrested for no reason. And you got to think about, hey, what does that person like need? And if you ask somebody to work and you're not paying them full rates, what do we call that in America? And suddenly this person that's like an old black establishment liberal and was like one of those people who, if you question Biden, they treat it like, oh, you've been tempted by Trump. And she used the phrase, oh, you guys have been tempted by Trump. And like I have to bridge a gap, make her realize like, no, I don't fuck with Trump. I want more out of this establishment that has been like pretend that's claiming to fight for us but hasn't done shit. It's March now. Where are the checks? Listen, I heard tell you this shit. Like you've been working with the Black Dems in Oregon. You've been doing a lot of the work that a lot of us need to do, talking to this establishment and saying, like, hey, look, these are the promises that y'all make us all the time, every time there's an election. And all that we ask is that you share these promises and ask each other to live up to these promises. And this older establishment, like, regardless of what they say, they stop for a minute and think about, hey, are we living up to what we promised? And most of the times, if you're a black establishment person, the answer is no. And you have to confront that shit on your own.
Yeah, I mean, with we talk about, we end up talking about this every time we talk, but with the black establishment, it's like, you know, we also assign purity to black people that black people have not been allowed in any other facet of their lives until maybe they get to the top, right? So like we are always willing to dunk on Kamala or something like that, as if she didn't have to make hard career choices that white people don't necessarily have to make all the time, and holding her to a purity test that, let's say, progressive DAs across the country were not held to. We don't examine what they were doing in the 90s to the same extent that we do to Kamala. Not to excuse for it, but there's definitely like a double standard.
Yeah. No, Rachel
There
and I
is,
talked about this.
and on the
Go ahead,
no,
Brandyn.
listen, I before you continue, Kennedy, I know you have something very useful to contribute, but I shit on Kamala all the time. But I'm like, listen, and I've said this during the primary, nobody was more a victim of prejudicial coverage from the press than Kamala Harris. And that literally includes Bernie, who ideologically is my guy. Like, I can't look at the treatment that she got and say, oh, that's not racist. Because it clearly was. Like, nobody who ran for president, and Kamala, a shit lib, whatever. Let's all like not excuse her for anything ideologically she does. But however, she was unfairly targeted more than anyone, with the exception of Bernie, with the possible exception of Bernie. They were both shat on to a huge degree. Even though I don't have anything ideologically in common with Kamala, she got shat on to a huge degree just because of the way she was born and it's bullshit.
And we look at what people in power, like even Joe Biden in the crime bill, or Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton on crime in the 90s and stuff. Like we can't just examine what people in power were doing on crime in the 90s without also examining that many black elders in actually the black community that now we're like, listen to black people, listen to black people, listen to black people.
Yeah.
There were lots of leaders in the black community because there was a, crack epidemic. Like nobody really knew the answers, and nobody really knew, just like with the Patriot Act or something. I mean, lots of people did know. Not everybody did know that it was going to end up impacting black people first and worst, right? And so, and so, like, we pass all these things. I mean, I think something similar might happen after the Capitol riots, where we pass something that has to do with protests or something, and it's going to end up unfairly impacting black people, right? And like, so when we look at how we dealt with the crime wave in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that, and then place it all on our leaders, and at the same time are saying, listen to black people, well, we have to somehow examine the fact that there were many black leaders telling these leaders at the time to push harder on crime. And so what do we do there? when Black leaders were wrong, if not in intent, then definitely in impact. You know, it's hard, and this dovetails into what I want to talk about. So the issue we have in Oregon is, you know, there's only 2 states in the entire country for the history of the entire country that allowed for people to be convicted with non-unanimous juries. So when you think of a jury, you think of like 12 Angry Men or any of those movies or something where you got to get everybody on the right side to convict somebody. And it's supposed to be hard to convict somebody. It's supposed to be really hard to take away someone's freedom. And it's supposed to be that like some people commit crimes and get off for them, you know, because you can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, in Oregon, in Louisiana, they did it because specifically for Black people, what their thing was, well, what's happening is Black people are getting on the juries after Reconstruction. We're pissed off because Black people are letting Black people off, and we want to be able to just lynch mob these people, right? And so what the hell, these Black people are letting other Black people off on juries. So let's make it so it doesn't have to be unanimous. In Oregon, it was specifically, there was a case where they felt that a Jewish person had committed a crime and that there were potentially Jewish people on juries that didn't understand how the criminal justice system was going to work and were letting people off because they're too communist or too Jewish or something like that.
Speak as the Jewish heritage
Jew
person
talk.
for 1 second
Yeah,
and just
that's
say, the Jews, no history of being obsessed with the law. No, noted as never obsessed
Disney
with the
Plus.
law at all.
Yeah.
I didn't say it. And so,
that's why we're a perfect team. None of us have to say it. We got a
but
Black
it's not
guy
even.
and a
I'm not
Jewish
even
guy.
trying to talk about just like the stereotypes of like Jewish lawyers. I'm talking about very literally in the history. You know, we had this whole system of judges and like thinking about like, you know, these sort of like that being as like the highest part of the government, even in like some of these like ancient Judaic societies. So like that's in our roots. We developed these systems y'all are using. Come on.
And so that this is part of the conspiracy that people in Oregon are saying. It's like Jewish people, if we allow them on the juries, we're going to be taking over our jurisprudence, basically. And so let's nullify minority voices. And I use the term minority, like not
in the right
like
way,
because it actually applies here. Yeah, because like literally it's like
Greg,
in
I
number
struggle
wise
with that all the time.
I know I'm saying minority specifically and intentionally because let's make it so where, you know, in Oregon it's mostly going to be white Protestant men, right? Let's make it so if 2 of someone that is not that get on the jury, they're not going to be able to stop people from getting convicted. And it's rooted specifically in racism, and it was started in Oregon specifically for Jewish people and Catholic people, but also for Black people. And if you would have told these people that it would disproportionately impact Black people in 80 years, they would be stoked. And now we had thousands of people that have been convicted with non-unanimous juries. Many of them end up getting exonerated later, right? Because a jury is supposed to be 12 unanimous people, right? And so eventually it goes to the Supreme Court last April, and the Supreme Court unanimously, even Justice Kavanaugh, as we'll see in this video, Gorsuch, RBG, everybody unanimously, they're like, what the hell? Of course, this is unconstitutional. The words jury trial mean unanimous. So you can't do this anymore, Oregon. By this time, Louisiana had already gotten rid of it. And so we had to stop convicting people with unanimous jury or with non-unanimous juries. But the problem is, and then Oregon thinks, just like on many issues, okay, cool, we can't do it anymore. We should have fixed it on our own, but whatever. We waited on Justice Brett Kavanaugh to tell us to stop because it was racist. Brett Kavanaugh tells us we're being racist, so whatever, we're gonna stop doing it. But those people are still in jail.
Yes.
And it's not retroactive. And so there's tons of people still in prison, which is the campaign name, stillinprison.org, for that have been convicted with non-unanimous trials, and then there's thousands of people that have been convicted and are still living with the stain of that conviction on their criminal record. You know, that affects their housing, that affects their rental situation, that affects their employment, all of this stuff. And we're not even asking
to vote too.
Yeah, exactly. And we're
not that too.
We're not at, especially if they move somewhere. I think in Oregon, felons can vote, but not while they're in the jail, obviously. And we're actually working on that right now as well. But if they move somewhere else and are a felon in Oregon, it doesn't matter. You would not be able to vote, right? In a lot of places. And so basically, and we're not asking to open the floodgates, because for one, we're only talking about a few hundred people that are still in jail for this. We're not asking for it to be automatic, because not everybody wants it to be automatic, because you could theoretically be retried for once these cases are vacated. And let's say you got 10 years, you could be retried and given 25. That would suck, right? Or you could be out and then get retried and then have to go back to jail. So what we're asking for is that people that apply for their trials to be, or for their non-unanimous convictions to be vacated, for them to not be fought, to vacate those convictions. And if the district attorneys believe they can convict these people without a Jim Crow jury, then they can do that. They can retry them. So this is perfect timing. Let's Kennedy, if we can show this video.
Yep, let's run this video.
The United States Supreme Court said convicting a person by a non-unanimous jury verdict is unconstitutional. That law was introduced for the sole purpose of preserving white supremacy. I felt happy for my friends and the people that I left in prison. The reason why they're in prison for all those years, our United States Supreme Court has said it was wrong. The state of Oregon has the power to send a message that we will never uphold laws intended to preserve white supremacy. I get emotional when I think about them, because they're still in prison. Angola, when I was one, they booked me for shooting that gun. When we was kids, our nursery rhyme with, we was going to commit a crime that was going to send us to Angola, and it rhymed with our age. I was two. I didn't give that much thought about the nursery rhymes until I got to Angola. And then I realized that there was a system that was going to make that song our reality. I always wanted to get out the environment that I grew up in. So I signed up for Job Corps, and I wound up here in Oregon. And living in that environment with the trees and the trails, it was like a fairy tale. That's when I actually felt free. But then 2 detectives arrested me based upon a warrant issued by the New Orleans authorities, accusing me of having committed a murder. I was placed on a unit in the Orleans Parish Prison where guys had already been sentenced to death. Some had 99-year sentences, some had life for petty drugs. When I would tell them about my case, that I was innocent, I didn't commit it, and all of them generally told me the same thing, that I was going to be executed. I started asking, well, how could I help myself? And that's when they told me, well, you got to learn the law. I started reading everything that I could get my hands on. I would always look in the newspaper, and if an influential person was arrested, I would cut those articles out and start creating my own law book. And in the process, I just fell in love with law. I fell in love with the power that it gives. And then I started trying to help other people as well. Once I got to Angola, then I applied for the job of being a jailhouse lawyer. And in researching a lot of the innocent cases, I noticed that their verdict was non-unanimous. Every state in the United States, you have to be convicted by unanimous jury, except Louisiana and Oregon. Klansmen introduced laws to make sure that the system could convict anybody they wanted. And if it's a minority on that jury, then that minority juror vote would not count. Had we had a system like everybody else, those people would not have been convicted because you had to have all of the jurors to agree. Once I got released, I knew that I wanted to continue to help the people in prison. So I got employed as a paralegal. So then I went to one of the lawyers that works at the firm where I work at. His name is Ben Coleman. And I said, man, we got to do something about this. And Ben response was, well, Calvin, if you find the cases, we'll litigate them all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And so I started working with the inmate lawyers for cases where the jury verdict was not unanimous. Then I would get with Ben and appeal to the United States Supreme Court. We constantly was denied. Every time we got denied, we brought another case. Ben would say, Calvin, if you're not tired, I'm not tired. And my response is, I'm never going to get tired because no law should be on the book to preserve white supremacy. After 23 tries, the court finally said, I think we should look at this case.
Hamilton himself said the right to a unanimous jury. It's so self-evident we don't need to include it.
The rule in question here is rooted in racism, in a desire to diminish the voices of Black jurors.
The words jury trial themselves mean unanimous verdict.
The United States Supreme Court ruled in our favor. So from this day on, no more convictions like that. The question becomes, what happened to those convictions before that? Should those people remain in prison based upon this law? There's hundreds of people that's still in prison. And then there are people that's not in prison that still have to say that they have a conviction. The state of Oregon could resolve that on their own. Our Attorney General, she have the power to do the right thing, to say everybody that was convicted based upon a racist law, whether they're in prison or out of prison, we dismissing those convictions. It's a sad thing that a person with all that power could say, I'm going to let those people stay in prison. When I was on the inside, I just wanted to be free. To me, what freedom is, freedom to take a position, a right position, to undo things that I see that just wrong. To me, that is freedom, and I hold on to that. And that's why I'm 57 years old, and it's my first semester at Lewis and Clark Law School. And I just know that once I become a lawyer, that would add to my freedom to be able to stand up and do the right thing for people.
Greg, that was a very moving video. It's really hard to watch stuff like that sometimes, you know, because I do know so many people from growing up poor that have been unfairly affected by these systems. And it's just that part, especially about the Attorney General having the opportunity to just stroke of the pen, just make it so. And choosing not to, it's horrifying.
It's hard to even come up with like how you could really sleep, you know, like knowing, especially now with a pandemic, even if you're, you know, we don't, I guess we technically have the death penalty in Oregon, but people are not executed in Oregon. Being in jail can be a death sentence. And we think about this around the country with bail reform right now. There are people who have died in jail, not even just prison, of COVID who were only there because they couldn't afford to get out.
Right.
So $500 to $5,000 could have bought you your ticket out of your super spreader event, and they didn't get it, and then you have bad treatment in jail as well. So especially in a pandemic now, thinking that there are hundreds of people in jail and we're not even asking for them, I think it would be a reasonable ask to just release them because those trials were tainted by racism. But that's not even like where the ask is even way more reasonable than that. It's get rid of those convictions and you can retry them if you think you have the evidence to convict them without a racist Jim Crow trial. So it's not a hard ask. And she really could just do it with the stroke of a pen. And one added layer on top of this is our attorney general was a judge who on some of these cases was the person who sentenced them or
Right.
and stuff too. So they have she has a sort of an interest, and maybe that might be one of the reasons why she doesn't want to vacate these, because she played a part in these convictions as well. But it's just, I mean, in her argument thus far has been, she's admitted this is racist. I wish we never had non-unanimous juries. She can't, let Justice Kavanaugh outflank her on declaring this racist. So she has said plainly this is racist, but her excuse is, if we just vacated these convictions, it will clog up the court. Which is BS, because like I have had situations where my friends don't text me back or they're at a protest or something, so I am looking up the jail logs to see who's been arrested or something. We're talking in Multnomah County, the county Portland is, there being like 80 cases. There's 80 new cases in Multnomah County a day. And not each of those 80 are even going to apply for this relief. And so it's not going to clog up the courts. I'm sure there are district attorneys who are very willing to allow this. And also, like, that's not a good excuse to keep human beings in prison.
Also, the clog up the courts, that excuse only comes out when it would mean something good for poor people. Because they want the courts full. They're
Yep.
If the courts are too quiet, they're talking about, hey, how do we get some cases in here? Like, but then suddenly poor folks say, hey, we need some restitution of some kind. They go, well, we can't clog up the court with all these cases.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's so true. I mean, like, if you were worried about clogging up the courts, I mean, for one, Oregon just decriminalized all drugs. So our courts are going to be declogged,
Yeah, that's
anyway.
a lot. That's
so
a
maybe
lot less.
that's a lot of cases that are usually in the courts. So, and I think, she's using that as an excuse, but I think the real excuse people have is, but in quotes, I think that the people who were convicted on non-unanimous trials are mostly guilty. And I think it'll be hard to convict them with a unanimous trial. And that's why I don't want to let them out. Sure, non-unanimous juries are racist, but I still think that they are guilty. It's just a coincidence that their trial ended up being non-unanimous. Had there not been allowed non-unanimous, we would have pushed differently and still got them, or something like that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, on the clogging the courts thing, just like most criminal cases, like DAs usually have really good conviction rates, but that's not because they're taking things to court. They have really great conviction rates because they charge you with something that is 25 years, right? Even if what you've done is worth 1 or 2, and then tell you, hey, but we'll give you time served, just take this little 5 years. And then your lawyer tells you, look, I think I could maybe beat the 25 years case, but it's not 100%. We could lose. And so, even if there's a lot of people who plea out because if you threaten me with life in prison, or I can plead guilty and take 5,
or in some
like,
cases
but
even just probation or something, which
yeah,
still will fuck
absolutely,
your life up if you're on probation for
absolutely.
years.
And those
But
people end up
sounds
going back to
better.
jail anyway. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And you think that that's good, but those people end up, failing a UA or not being able to get a job, which leads them back into more crime or something like that. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Like, okay, yeah, I'll just take this guilty plea, even if I didn't do it. Now I'm in the system. I'll take my time served. I'll take my 1 year, 5 years probation, any of that stuff, rather than this lofty sentence. And that's honestly, while that practice is heinous and bad, that's honestly what's going to happen with a lot of these cases. Is the DA is going to say, look, it was non-unanimous. We think we could get you again, but with a unanimous jury. Just take your time served, plead guilty, and then we'll get you out of here. And a lot of people are going to take that. So it's not really going to clog up the courts. It's a bad excuse. I think there might be some people who did the thing who get off. And that's how our justice system is supposed to work. It's just like beyond me that people think it should swing the other way, right? Like, it's better to have somebody who did a crime get off than to have people who didn't do crimes sitting in jail for crimes that they didn't do. It's supposed to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, we talk about the scales of justice, but it is supposed to be incredibly hard to take away someone's rights completely and put them in jail. That is supposed to be hard. And if someone beat you by committing a crime and doing it in a way where you can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, then sorry, you don't get to put that person in jail.
Well, and also, I mean, in this case, with the scale of getting off that we're talking about is these people have already served time.
Yep.
They have already served time. So maybe you wanted them in for 12 years and they did 7 and they got off because of this law. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Like, why are we hung up on that? That some people would get out of, probably in a lot of cases, they're not the same person and are ready to go out and, live a different kind of life after that time in prison. Even if it wasn't as long as you had planned for them to be there,
And for
so
most of these
let's get
people,
them
they're
out of
already
there.
out. They're already, for a lot of, like, so we're talking, it's one of the problems is we don't have hard numbers on a lot of this, but where the estimates and pretty good estimates are, a few hundred that are in jail and then like 1,000 or ish that are out of jail. These people, so most people that are impacted by this are already out. They're already in society. So like the argument that like now we're gonna lift this conviction off their record is gonna be like bad for society. Why? Now that this person is gonna have a clear record and be able to like and like for the people that we've talked to that have been impacted by this, for a lot of them, it's not, a lot of them, they don't need it lifted off their record because they've had to figure out ways to live life anyway with their record. So a lot of them have been able to find housing or a job, or we have Ban the Box here, which makes it to where you can't really stop someone from getting a job because they have a felony conviction. And so a lot of people have lived past in it. And for a lot of these people, it really is the moral of the thing. Like, it really is like this is right. I didn't do it. I was convicted. There were 2 Black people on my jury that said I didn't do it. And they couldn't be listened to. And then the other thing is, we talk about it, of course, from the perspective of the people that are in jail, which are the people that are or out of jail, but who have been wrongfully or just racially convicted. But also, and this is kind of weird, but it takes away the jurors' rights as well. Like being on a jury and taking it seriously is part of our society. And it's part of being a productive member of our society. And if you, like, let's say you are, like, specifically you were on a jury and you have all this class analysis and all this stuff that you are bringing to a jury. This is why it's not just a jury of one, why we have 12 different people come in, because they're bringing all this different things. If you bring all of your experience growing up poor and with class analysis and like all of this stuff into it, and you are the only person that has this view, but because of that view, you are able to poke holes in the prosecution, your voice matters, and you should be able to stop that conviction because of your lived experience. That's why we put 12 people in the room together as opposed to just one or two or three, right? Like, it's supposed to be a jury of your peers. And if two of your peers are woke and those woke voices don't count, then now you're just having racist convictions.
Right, exactly. And it's, you know, the idea of having a jury make these decisions is appealing to a sort of sense of common wisdom. And you can't do that without including enough voices. It doesn't work. As soon as you start to say, oh, we don't need a unanimous jury, then yeah, exactly like you said, like some perspectives are just going to get left out, and that's how it is. But the problem is, I think, that both unanimous and consent are both kind of dirty words in this country, right? Like, these are not things that a lot of people think about super favorably and would necessarily think to protect right away, because the idea, a lot of times people in this country, they're afraid of like too much democracy, mob rule, things like that. And so the entire idea of defending this is sort of battling with American culture a little bit, I think, which doesn't really fully accept that something like this has value.
It is. I mean, part of it is people view the unanimous juries, like, because juries have been synonymous with being unanimous for so long and we've never really had to defend it as a right, etc. People, like, sometimes I have conversations with people and they're like, oh, 10-2 sounds good. Why, you know, like, why does it need to be unanimous? 10-2 actually sounds good to me. Like, does my state have 10-2? And I'm like, no states other than 2 states have ever like done this before, because I do think that, you know, we haven't had to talk about juries and what that means and whether unanimous, like what that really means and stuff a lot. And unless you've seen some of these like jury movies or gone to law school or something like that, then it's hard. And the other thing is, what people don't understand is, if there is a holdout juror or 2 holdout jurors or something like that, and they can't go unanimous the other way, that doesn't mean the person is let off. That means it's a mistrial. They get to retry it again. I think that happened in Bill Cosby's first case. It doesn't mean that now that because there's not, like in every other state, like Georgia or wherever, that you have to have unanimous convictions, that now they're not going to be able to get people. There will be a mistrial, and mistrials happen a lot. And usually it'll be like 2 or 3 times that a prosecutor's willing to like keep bringing it before they just drop it or something. But theoretically, I think a prosecutor could bring a case 1,000 times until they got it, until it was unanimous one way or the other. And so it's not saying, you know, that 2 people should be able to necessarily make it so the person is innocent, but 2 people should be able to stop a conviction in a trial. I mean, that's just like RBG said in that video. It like that Hamilton said that it is so obvious that Hamilton felt that it didn't even have to be included in the Constitution, because the terms jury trial and unanimous are the same thing. He felt like we don't even have to say it.
Yeah.
I've dealt with so many people who are well-intentioned, and like when you talk to them, like I was doing a canvas in West Atlanta, and I talked to an older Black woman who was like a liberal, you know, give Joe Biden some space and he'll work it out, that kind of person. And as we were talking, like literally about like all of this stuff that we're talking about, it's just like, hey, you know, give people a little more time and they'll work it out. And we've dealt with that for so many years. And it takes a lot to kind of like focus people's attention on like creating an authentic emotional incentive for people that makes them understand the urgency of the moment that they're living in. Because there's like kind of a two-sided thing about like people understand the urgency of the moment that they're living in, but have been indoctrinated into patience. So you have to say like, hey, you've been trained to be patient, but you know in your heart that this moment is urgent. And anybody that you talk to that's like a Black person, that's a Latino person, that's an Asian person, that's like a marginalized person, no matter what their situation is, even if they're like a small business shithead, or they're a lib, or they want to give Kamala like an reasonable amount of space, whatever your ideological sub issue with them is, people understand the urgency of the moment they're living through right now. And that really gives me like some encouragement. Like, even if you talk to somebody who's normally out of touch, they've lived through Trump for 4 years, and there is a huge understanding of the urgency of the moment. And I think that's a really good way to talk to people and to get their support. Because even those people who are usually like slow to get these things, even they understand how bad things are right now.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to reach the people. And whether on criminal justice or on unions, we've got this thing called the PRO Act that's circulating across the country. And it's one of the rare things that Biden has been kind of good on, in the sense of card check and labor issues and make it easier for people to start unions in the workplace. This act makes it easier for people to organize at their workplace. And people have been super enthusiastic about it and have changed the coalitions that have been traditional. A lot of people who have typically been right-wing, slow-to-move people understand the value of labor and have been moving on that. And I feel like there's a lot of potential. A lot of people who have, thought, hey, brunch libs are going to drop the ball as soon as this shit goes down. They have, like, honestly, but I don't think any of them predicted how much the left would continue to control a conversation. And I think everybody who's watching this, whether they're a Twitter poster, a Facebook poster, Reddit, or whatever they have, stuff like these checks, stuff like this detention, stuff like kids in cages, none of that has left the public eye. And there's been a lot of energy spent on shaming like right-wing shitheads, but none of our issues have left the public eye. And it's the duty of everybody that's here watching this to make sure that the shit that we care about never leaves the public eye. And people have been great about that, whether it's on immigration or reparations or criminal justice. We've done a great job of making sure that that does not leave the conversation. And people who are watching this, you've been winning, keep doing what you're good at, which is raise hell and demand what you need. And like Greg is somebody who I look to as an inspiration, because no matter how bad things get, he never takes his eye on the ball, which is like justice for the most oppressed people in our society, whether it's trans people, Black people, gay people, whatever it is. Like, he's always thinking, how can we make sure that these people are taken care of and thought of? And it takes really just being like 5 minutes ahead of the conversation, because no matter how bad things are, there are so many people who care about making sure that justice is done. No matter what their sub coalition is, there are so many who care about people making sure that justice is done. And he's done a great job of reaching those people, and we've done a good job of reaching those people too. And I would say anybody who's watching this, find the people in your worldview in your town that care about just the right thing being done, and you will make unexpected alliances, man. Like, it'll blow your mind. The people who like really agree with you on that.
Yeah. I think that's so powerful.
Nobody can say it better than that.
Yeah. I think that's we need everybody to be looking out, figuring out who their allies really are, and then making it happen with those people. And it's the people around you that are just living it, that are just in the struggle. Those people are your real allies. And like you were saying earlier, Greg, you might not walk up to them first convo, they seem super woke, like right out the gate, because they're not there yet. But I think what you will find a lot of the times when you go out there and you talk to real working class people and you associate with those kind of people, is that maybe they don't have all the answers, but they do understand there's a structural problem. And that's a great
They know the
basis to
questions.
organize with somebody on.
Yeah. And it's I mean, Brandyn, you know better than me, but I mean, like, I think it's the national impression that it was the 2K checks that really won the Senate for the Dems, right? Like, that was the issue that I think drove a lot of voters out, or at least drove a lot of the volunteers nationally to try and flip the Senate. And like,
Bro,
when you
I have
really
a guy.
engage people
I've
on
got a guy.
issues,
You haven't met him. His name's Rogelio Arcilla, and like there's like 12 people watching this now, so it's not a spoiler to say it. He's gonna announce he's running for city council like Monday, and like on a lot of levels, he's learning from me the same shit I learned from you. That there's like a lot of universality in what we're going through right now, and we have to meet that feeling of universality in these alliances that we find ourselves with urgency. And like lots of people in Atlanta have picked up the work that you've taken, man, and have taken your perspective on how to do this shit. And I know that like you often feel like I didn't finish the work I started. But man, when you inspire somebody, that's the work. And like I feel super proud that I've been able to inspire a few people in my few months of like being in charge of things, and you did that same thing too. And like all of us have got to support our families at the end of the day, man. And like my grandmother is going through some hard shit right now. Like shit I never anticipated, being a little child looking up to her as like a 60-year-old woman who like knew all the answers. And now like she's 90 and like her body's falling apart, and like she's got to recontextualize her life because she was like a tomboy and a country girl. And now, like, she can barely get out of bed and do the shit she needs to do. So she's got to think about, like, she was a person who everybody knew as a person with unstoppable willpower. And now, like, her body is not working the same way it used to. And she's got to think about what her limits are in a new way. And, like, me, as a person that grew up on Bankhead and Hightower, if you are from Atlanta, those words hold a lot to you. You've got to think in a new way about what you're capable of, and what you can achieve by yourself, and what you can achieve with help from others. And it takes like being able to open up to people in a way that maybe you weren't comfortable with just surviving. And I feel like us as a community, like, hey, like Greg, you know, you could have done everything in your life that you wanted to without your wife. Like if she didn't exist, you would be in the same place, because you have that much willpower, and she would have been in the same place without you, because she's a person, like I've only met her a handful of times. She has extraordinary willpower, but like you guys found that there was comfort in each other. And when you have to deal with your doubts, you've got to deal with them in your own way, and she does too. And you guys support each other through that. And we as a people, like specifically Black people, it's funny that I used her as the example for that. But like we have to find a way that we can support each other in the same way. That when we know that like, hey, we got nothing else to live for, nothing else to give, that we can give to each other. And that's hard to do. Like it's super hard. But like I've found consistently that we found ways to do it on a local level, on a national level, whether we're talking about criminal justice, whether we're talking about community organizing, whether we're talking about whatever it is. I have just been overwhelmed with the number of people who have said, hey, let's all take the first step together. It is so hard. Like if you're watching this, the first step is the hardest one. And if you're in your neighborhood and you're dealing with the same kind of bullshit that Greg's talking about here in Portland, I got some bullshit that's the same way in Atlanta. You know, you say the name Jamarian Robinson in Atlanta, people will, like you say the name Oscar Kane in Atlanta, people will get super sad because they feel helpless, because these are two people who put it on for the city, and like both happen to lose their lives to police injustice, like to just bad shit happening. And we all have to decide, hey, are we going to do the right thing for each other or not? And we all take, like Greg, one of the reasons why I always trust you on matters in Portland, you have always made like the right choice to help people who have nothing else to give. And man, I try to follow in that, and everybody I talk to, I try to tell them to do the same thing, man, to do what you're doing and to do what I'm doing.
And we gotta, I mean, I think just to piggyback off that, just like give grace to people too. That, I think not to be like the moderate person, but I do think that Donald Trump did something to our country where he really like ripped apart just like any of our like shared commonalities and decency. Like, and I don't want to be the old fashioned like fork on the left type of person, but I do think that like for me, I'm like, we know that police kill people and it's horrible. And I'm not gonna say anything to somebody on the internet who I think that could be killed by the police and not have be the last thing that I've said to them. Like there's nobody that I'm gonna
real
say something
shit,
wild
man.
to. There's no one I'm gonna say something wild to on the internet. And then if they got killed by the police, I'm gonna go to the protest for your life. Like if like unless you're the type of person where I dislike you so much that if the police kill you, I'm not going to the protest, and I'm not saying wild shit to you on the internet. Like, because this could be the last thing that I say to you. This could be the last thing that I say to you because, one, I don't know what somebody's going through in their life, right? Like, I think almost anybody's lost friends to self-harm and suicide, etc., or overdose, or police violence. Like, so if even if I don't know you, there's a lot of people who I mean, Heather Heyer is a great example of somebody that was killed at the Unite the Right, I think, in Charlottesville. And like it's wild because there were a lot of like people on the hard left calling Heather Heyer like a liberal and stuff like before that. Somebody that went to a protest, and you never know who's going to drive a car through the protest. So like I'm not saying wild shit to the Heather Heyers in my life, and especially not the Black people in my life who I know could fall victim to police violence. You have to give these people grace, because at the end of the day, you're going to feel really fucking stupid if the last thing you said to somebody was that you hate them because of their take on some issue that we're not even going to have, like anarchism versus communism, that we're not even going to be able to fight that war for 100 years, and the fucking world has collapsed anyway. And I've said something wild to you on the internet about that, and then you fall victim to the police, and that was the last thing I said to you? Hell no.
No, man. And listen, like as I started this conversation, I opened it up. I talked about Black people because I'm thinking about Black people all the time, man. However, just to like add some interest to our viewers, Rachel is like Heather Heyer. Like she hasn't like lost her life, thank God, but like she has that same commitment. And even though she says shit all the time that I roll my eyes at, like I try to extend, like you talked about grace, man. I try to extend grace to everybody who's in here for the same reason I am. Like if I can look at you and say, like, regardless of like I don't agree with your approach, you're not like, you have a dumb, like every mistake that a human being makes, there's a context to it. And the context is just their entire life. So if I can look at your life and see a context where I feel like you are trying to do the right thing, man, I will find a way to like make room for you, even if I don't agree with you all the time. And because there is so much like brainwashing in our media, in our financial lives, in our family lives, just in like how we're supposed to think about not our just ourselves. Although I would advise like literally everybody who's watching this, read the book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, because it is literally a book that is about culture brainwashing you to have low self-esteem. I feel like every woman that's on the left should read The Autobiography of Malcolm X, because literally the shit is just about like shit I thought was normal in my life was actually meant to break my pride as a person.
Yeah.
And that book is literally about Malcolm coming to terms with that. Like shit that I took for granted in my life was meant for me to feel worthless or for me to feel powerless. And I actually do have power, and I actually do have strength, and it comes from my community. And here was a guy who, in Malcolm, who was in jail. So like your ability to exert yourself is at an all-time limit. You can only express yourself through what other people are feeling, how they're living, what they're doing. And he set a great example. Like none of us are Malcolm X, but all of us have the ability to set an example on our own, like super low scale. And I'm just super grateful that all the people who I have on this show and the people who go on Twitter and post, all of them are in their own smaller way great examples. People who have just willed themselves to be in it, not because they're perfect people, but have just said, hey, I want to be an example for other people who are coming right behind me. And all of y'all who are watching this or commenting have done that like over and over. And I can only believe that we'll see the fruits of that, like, and the people who come behind us and want to do the same shit that we're doing and like get on our nerves sometimes, but do the right thing. We just need more people who are willing to, you guys know, like take a day out of their day and do what's right. That makes a lot. And all of y'all have been an instrumental part of doing that.
Yeah. Damn, Brandon. You said it all.
Yeah. Not to run away with it, but that's been on my mind the last couple of days.
You killed it. I mean,
yeah.
No, and I think especially, I'm so glad you brought up Malcolm X because, you know, he's the one that said in some form, better than I say, that, you know, you can't get mad at people for not knowing what you know today because there was a time where you didn't know it yourself.
You didn't know what you know now.
Yeah, exactly.
For any black person that's ever felt like a cornball, they should go read the autobiography of Malcolm X because he lived through all the shit that you are trying to go through right now.
And what's wild is like I've seen on different days where I've seen like whether it be like his birthday or the day of his assassination, etc. Some people bringing up like, you know, that he had bad views sometimes at different points on women or on homosexuality, etc. But then they forget that like we're not just a victim of our own experience, but everybody is also on a trajectory, and this person's trajectory was cut short. You don't know what this person would have become in 2020, right? So like to hold people at a moment in time, one, as if that person didn't grow even in their own life, but when we're ignoring the fact that they have been cut off, there was a point like Malcolm X's life could have ended before he became Malcolm X, right? He could have still been Malcolm Little. His life could have ended, and that's a person that we could have canceled. Right, like that.
We could have.
Twitter was around at the time, would have been canceled for being bad to women, for like, you know, these things. Not excusing any of that, but just to say that we are like all not just victims of our own experience, but we're also on a trajectory, and people will be at a point in their trajectory, and then look at the people that are still like behind them or have moved at a different pace towards radicalization or something like that, and been like, haha, liberal, this and that, as if we are fixed people, or as if you were always you were born woke. Like I wasn't born woke. There in 2008 or not 2008, I was too young, but in 2012, I was super stoked about Obama, right? Like, and like that nostalgia, honestly, like I can't have it taken away from me. That still exists. It was still powerful for me to see somebody that had hair like me, like be able to be president or something. Like that mattered. Now obviously I know a lot more. But like the thing
no matter
is, like,
what your ideology is, when he gave that Amazing Grace speech, no matter what, like, and this is part of what like if you're white, he's hitting a note that you can't hear. Like, you know, when a dog, like you like have a little whistle for a dog, and we talk about dog whistling all the time. When that dude was crying about those dead kids, and he said "Amazing Grace." Like he hit a note that I feel like no matter what you're like, if you didn't hear it, you didn't hear it. But like a lot of people who grew up with the same pain that he grew up with heard that note. And you have to have a lot of personal distance or wherewithal to separate yourself from the note he hit that day. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. That's the good point.
we've talked about Obama a lot, and like, there was definitely, you know, that was an important time for a lot of people, regardless of that stuff. And like, yeah, it's all a journey, because that stuff can be important, and then that stuff can be, it all ties together into this larger fabric of experiences. And being moved by things that Obama said, and those things bringing you closer to the left, is not irrelevant, regardless of the fact that Obama's a neo-lib freaking jerk sometimes. Like, that's not it still matters. And yeah.
And I think it matters too, especially as we engage with people that we're trying to move towards the left. If you come into a conversation with like older Black people, this is why, like, I was trying to hit this point in the primary with Bernie people. They didn't get it. They didn't understand the affinity for Joe Biden, as if like we've seen a white man stand next to a Black person for 8 years and just like be sidekick for 8 years. Like, there was some power in that with the older Black community that like it's impossible to explain. It's impossible to explain to people. And like, people are like, what's the appeal of Joe Biden? And then going into Black communities oftentimes and trying to shit on Joe Biden on like as just in the aggregate, like as a liberal, instead of like on policies or on things like the crime bill, and be like, this is how it impacted your community. And they're like, yeah, well, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I was advocating for that alongside Joe Biden, so it's like,
Right.
We have to find
Well,
ways to engage with people and understand. Yeah.
The good news is, like, those people are like, people think they're made of stone or whatever. Like those 45 plus Black people that are very traditional, I think those people are made, but they are like, share a lot of politics with you. Like, I was doing a neighborhood cleanup, and an older Black lady showed up to me, and when I criticized Biden for taking too long to like get these checks out to people, she said, like, as part of her speech in an offhanded way, she's like, I know you've been tempted by Trump. And like, of course, that's not politics at all. But like, she does not have the ability to conceive of politics outside of that one versus one kind of mindset. So when I talked about, and Kennedy, we did an episode with Yandos Martin talking about criminal justice and like reframing the way we think about it. And she was like enthusiastic about like, well, if you get caught for a crime, you got to pay your debt to society. And that's the only way people will care about it. So this person that's like shares a lot of ideals with you has this weird right-wing leaning in terms of like, what should the person do when they've done something wrong? And I talked to her, was like, hey, I know a lot of people, and this is important to relating to older Black people because they have the same story you do. I know a lot of people, I told her, who were innocent or who were caught up on bullshit. And those people work really hard on their craft, whatever it is, thinking they could get out. And to make them work for free without being paid, you're a grown woman, you know what that is. And like this person who's like, and you're Black, if you're a Black person, hey, the elders in the community, we try to respect. This person like felt kind of ashamed when I pointed that out. And like, she didn't necessarily like revoke her feeling, but she like talked to me in a different way because like, hey, I can connect to you on a level that I can cut through all this bullshit. I know what you really care about. And so many of these people who are like lowercase L liberal, they care about the same shit that you care about. They just have a different idea of what is possible. So you have got to be, whether it's in Oregon or Georgia or West Atlanta or Detroit, because like lots of people ask me, like, I'm in whatever part of the country, how do I reach people? Wherever you are, you've got to like, don't start with yourself, start with what their experience is, start with listening. And if you can talk about all these issues from a tone of like listening and caring about people and helping them, then all these conversations become a lot easier. They just do.
Well, and I think what you're getting at is at the root of what a lot of we've been talking about today, which is kind of getting past that crab pot mentality and just looking at your fellow human and saying, I'm willing to take a chance on you. I'm willing to take a chance on the idea that you deserve better. And that's what like this Still in Prison campaign is about. That's like just kind of at the core of like I said, just kind of everything we talked about today. Gregory McKelvey, thank you so much as always for joining us. You're just one of the most pleasurable, wonderful guests to have every time. And you just always bring the most important stuff that we could be talking about a lot of the time too. So I just really appreciate you coming by today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Y'all always answer the bat signal. So thank you so much. Thanks, Brandyn.
Always, anytime. Anytime you got something important, you just always let us know. You got anything you need to plug before you get out of here?
Stillinprison.org.
Yeah, we are never, for people who don't know better, if Greg is involved, we are not on hiatus. Like literally, there's some shit going down in Portland and Greg puts out the bat signal, we are answering that bat signal 24/7, dog. Like you don't have to ask. Like we're just here to do it.
I appreciate it. That's the only thing though. Visit stillinprison.org. Get involved. Thank you all so much for having me. Appreciate it. And I'm sure I'll have something fucked up next time for y'all. But we can talk it out. All right, y'all.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. We are Not Safe for Wonks, and this is just a little special that we just brought you while we're on our break. We're enjoying our break very much. We're excited to come back from it and with some new stuff, but that's where it's at right now.
Listen,
what's up,
if
Brandyn?
You're a patron and you're thinking to yourself, what, I'm not getting a lot from a Patreon subscription in best of circumstances. Like we literally like openly tell you, we're not like a great Patreon subscription. Like there are shows that give you like tons of content all the time. If you're subscribed. And we try, like we drop 1 or 2 exclusives per month, but we're not like an elite. We're regular people just trying to stretch this shit out and get by. So like if you're wondering today, like, hey,
I just want to say this shit today is like why we do it. This is why, this is 100%. This is all it's about for us. We don't really make any money. Yeah. It's not always a ton of fun, but we have so many friends that are doing the important work and the work is not getting heard enough. And we do our best to elevate it. And that's like why Greg is here today. That's why we're here.
That's
and
right.
I think our patrons that give a shit know that,
That's right. And we won't stop. We'll never give up. We'll never surrender. We'll never retreat. That's right.
That's right. All right.
So
let's get out of here, I guess. Right? Or
let's get out of here.
Yeah,
I love you. Get out of here.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye, everybody.